guys here. He was doing demo boards working, and Bruce was working and showing up. So some of the guys here obviously were playing. A lot of the people in the tournament were playing.
I actually saw the tail end of this game when you shook hands with him.
I did too.
I'm not supposed to.
So Brad calls me up. I'm at home. I'm living in Lincoln, so this is a lot better than the year before for my transit purposes. He calls me up and says, "You're playing Benko."
On board 2 with black.
With black. Thank you. If he plays D4, I'm playing the Benko Gambit.
Yeah, I remember that too.
So he didn't play D4. He played Knight F3. Now, the thing is, because I had advance notice of all this, this is the only game that my parents ever watched me
I was
play.
gonna say,
My entire life.
they came with you, or brought you that evening.
Yeah, they brought me down, and Sue was down there. Total side story here. My parents were mad at Sue. That's my sister-in-law, married to my brother Wes, who was here for the Hall of Fame the other day. I had asked her to bring T-Bear down. I wasn't hanging around with him during the tournament, but I thought he'd really want to be there. But I wasn't going to embarrass Benko by having him sitting on my lap or anything like that.
Yeah.
There's a Kansas City Star picture of Brad with T-Bear in his lap from one of the Kansas City tournaments. Yes, legendary.
Is it Jack Spence's newsletter?
So
I came down to a king and queen on my side and a king, 2 bishops, and a pawn on his side.
that could be good.
Well, but that was, once we cleared the board, but there was no way he could get, his stuff was all over the place.
Right.
It wasn't condensed or anything like that, so I could force him around until I could get in a situation where I could pick up one of his bishops. That was over.
Yeah. So, but T-Bear was sitting on a chair in the audience.
Yeah.
So my parents were irritated with Sue for doing that, but it's my fault. I asked her to bring him.
Yeah.
People were talking the other day, like Rich Perry at the thing, about whether your parents were supportive of chess. My parents thought I was wasting my time, but they weren't going to forbid me to do anything. They just never paid for anything. Every tournament I ever went to, I paid for myself. Even when I went to the National High School, Lincoln Chess Foundation gave me $50. Unfortunately, if you went student standby on the airline, it was $25 back then. So, woo! The Chess Federation paid for my airfare.
Sounds better.
Doesn't it sound better? Yeah. So,
We were creative at budgeting for tournaments back in the 70s.
and
We had to.
the rest of my money came from having worked that summer in the soybean fields. So I didn't have support, but I didn't have negatives either. But after this game was the first time when my dad acknowledged to me that maybe I wasn't wasting my time playing chess. So it was very big of my dad. So this is a really important game to me. It had a lot of personal consequences, and surprisingly, as I said, the game is sort of better than I thought. Well, I didn't play the D4, so what do? These days, I'd probably play something like G6 or Knight F6 or C5. I play all those at various times and such. But back then, Mike was here yesterday, Matthews, and he and I and some of the other players around there were really interested in some books that Watson had been writing, along with ones by Ray Keane and such like that, on what some people call the rat or the modern defense. And so I rolled out D6. I wasn't quite, there's a variation in this that back then Mike Matthews and I played that we called the flying wedge. It was a big pawn structure here for black, and I just always thought it was dubious until many, many years later I saw Grandmaster Anand playing it. I go, oh, I see our opening theory has caught on. Not from us in that point, but it was nice to see that our judgment was in some way justified. So in this game I play here, and then it goes here, and it does a D4. Now I can't play the Benko gambit. This is terrible. So what do? Well, I rat. G6. And then he goes E4. Oh no. I could play the main lines and things like that, so I do for a bit. But then he really gets me. He plays C3.
Oh, boring.
Like, oh no. None of the expanding variations where I can play like A6 and B5 and go for some kind of queenside counterplay over to my diagonal, which I haven't blocked by my knight by refusing to develop. Which you see in those Biasis games and King games and all those other rat games from those days. Not yet, but I'm not going to be able to do that. So what do? Well, the only thing I can think of to do is go back and make an appearance defense. What else? And for a few moves, we follow theory. And here black has a number of choices. A lot of people say like rook to E8 and such like that. I went this way for the preparation. Oops. I dropped a pawn. So black's gonna try to play E5, which is like Gary said, boring. But what else do I have? I play this, and he at this point. After he played knight b to d2, I was looking at current theory the other day. Current theory is a5. Really aiming at the base of the pawn chain all the way down here. You know, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't think of that. Because I was always usually used to the way they were attacking it by going for c5 and such like that. But so what do? I go back to this idea. I'm going to play b5 maybe. Since he's going to let me take the c4 square. But current theory now says you should play a4 to b stop b5. He played here. And now I could actually probably play b5. I didn't, but I could. But I'm still looking at playing e5, so I play queen to c7. Yeah, all these moves are making virtually no wave whatsoever on the little what do we call them these days?
Evaluation bar.
Evaluation bar, right? I'm old. We didn't have no evaluation bars back then. The evaluation bar, when you look at on your silicon god, it says it's barely fluctuating here. These are all in the range of top 3 moves. So queen c7, and now it does a4. Tricky. So he's expanding on the queen side, which means, the only place I can go for counterplay is the obvious e5. And he did a move I actually expected. He played here. Because people always did that to me when these openings, when I played d6 and e5, and they try to get me on this diagonal here. And when I first started out, I fell for that kind of stuff a lot. But I'd seen it enough by this point that I had an idea that I wanted to get my rook away from here. So I play rookie. Dead even on the evaluation bar at this point. So rook e8. And he's surprised me now by breaking the tension. What's this all about? Because black wants to exchange pieces. And he does. Interestingly, the computer says if I have a really teeny tiny advantage for me for the first time if I play rook takes. And I don't think I even considered that move in the game. Why? Because I'm not playing for a win. pressure, and black has some flexibility when he played rook e5. But I'm looking, this is a terrible backward pawn on d6, and I've always hated backward pawns on d6, even though lots of theory says in different openings they're great, they're fine. But I was being chicken. So, pawn takes, still. So now I have to think about how I'm going to redeploy the rest of my pieces. And he sort of helps me here, but I didn't do it right in response. He plays queen to f3. I don't really know why he did that. I guess he's afraid that at some point I'm going to hit with rook to d8 or something. I'm going to hit his bishop on d3, and he just wants to get out of there. But now both of the pieces are lined up there. And what I should do, and if I do this, I actually have, again, a small advantage, is to play either bishop e6 or rook to d8, one of those two. Go to that default right away where the bishop is loose on there, where I might be able to do something. Or I could play bishop e6 and see, and of course, hope that he plays rook to d1. Yeah, the Grandmaster's going to do that, right? Well, why waste my turn of bishop to g5 immediately? But I thought I was moving into a worse square, so I played here. I didn't do that.
That would be great.
So I attacked his queen and got him to move over here, and then played back to where I just should have played in the first place, and kept that other thing in reserve. And the main reason this is not a worse square for him was that in a lot of variations, Black's idea to reposition his pieces, the bishop on g7 is in these positions kind of dead. So what would you guys do to try to get it back into the game?
Bishop f8.
Bishop f8, or somewhere else. The pawn's still blocking you if you move the knight.
Whose move is it?
Well, it's not in this position. I'm talking about in general.
H6.
H6, right.
Okay.
And I just forced him to prevent me from doing that. And so later on, I'm struggling a little with that bishop, and that's why I had the advantage before and don't now. Because all the variations with rook to d8 and everything, the key move is to be able to play bishop to h6. And then Black can even do things like knight h5 and knight f4, which is an idea I should know. Those of you who know me long enough might remember my game with Senior Master Stefan Popel from the Jerry Spahn Memorial, where I played him in the first round. He was at 2400 and I was at 1800. And I drew, but I should have won. But my winning attack started by playing bishop to h6 and knight to h5 from one of these kinds of positions. And so I should have just put on my little time capsule and said, well, 3 years ago I knew what to do here. Somehow I've forgotten in the meantime. So that's the best plan, because you can make some weaknesses over here if you do that. But now I don't have bishop to h6, and so he is now slightly better. Again, not significantly, but slightly better. Mainly because he can now play rook to d1, which he couldn't do before if I hadn't forced his queen to a better square. But now I can bring my rook in as well. And obviously, no, he can't take the a-pawn, his bishop's hanging if he does that. So he has to make another move before he does that, and he plays bishop to c4, which I was sort of hoping, counting on as his way to get, because that means sooner or later I'll be able to trade another piece. Because Black is slightly cramped, so what do you want to do when you got a cramped position? Gain space by trading some pieces, yeah. And then the pieces don't get tangled in each other's ways. So sooner or later I'll be happy to trade off that bishop on c4. And in fact, I should do it right now. I started worrying about him taking my a-pawn now that his bishop isn't there. And mostly I was afraid of something that isn't real. That's a common feeling that we all have as chess players. Remember how I was worried about that d6 square? And I started looking at this and well, if I take his bishop right now, he's going to have 3 pieces attacking d6. Uh-oh. And he's going to plant a bishop or a knight on there, and I'm just gonna suffer. Yeah, that suffered at the hands of Grandmasters, that's something all of us do really well. So, by the way, this is the first Grandmaster I'd ever played. I played International Masters. I played the World Junior Champion at the US Open the year before, but back then, they only gave you an IM title when you won the World Junior, so he wasn't the GM. So this is my first GM, and I'm thinking, oh, that looks bad if I let him do that. But it's actually the right move, and it's for a really simple tactical reason, which I had never noticed until I came back to this game. I can swap off a pair of rooks, all these changes I want, and then play rook to d8, preparing to get another one, and oh yeah, this is a back rank, isn't it? So if he puts anything on here, no matter what it is, I can just play knight d8. He loses a piece. So seeing that when I went to analyze it now, I didn't see that during the game. And so I give him a small advantage again. Not very much, but a small. Whereas I actually stand slightly better if I play it this way. So, live and don't learn, that's me.
You do okay anyway.
Sometimes. So I just started with, okay, what can I do? Yeah. I said, well, what can I do?